Get comfortable. Turn the lamp down, if there is a lamp, and let your shoulders come away from your ears. You do not need to follow this closely. You do not need to remember any of it. Tonight we are going out onto the North Atlantic in the autumn of 1888, aboard a first-class steamer bound from Liverpool to New York. And the only thing asked of you is that you stay warm and let the sound of it carry you off. There is a picture most of us have of what that was like, and it is worth taking apart before we go anywhere, because it will only get in the way. The picture usually begins with a staircase, a great sweep of polished oak under a glass dome, a woman coming down it slowly in silk, one gloved hand on the rail, a small orchestra somewhere below playing something in 3/4 time. There is a ballroom in the picture, and the ballroom is enormous and warm and gold, and there are palms in brass pots, and the sea outside is a flat blue nothing that never rises above the level of the windows. Everybody is at leisure. Everybody is charming. The voyage is a long, glittering party held above deep water, and when it ends, the woman walks down the gangway into New York with her hat at the correct angle, and not one thing has gone wrong. That picture comes to us mostly from films, and the films are mostly set 25 years later than the night we are going into, on ships 2 or 3 times the size of the one you are about to board. The grand staircase under the dome was a thing of the 1900s and after. In 1888, on a fast mail steamer of about 500 feet, you go below by a stair that is handsome, certainly, but narrow enough that 2 women in full skirts cannot pass one another on it without one of them stopping and turning sideways, and everybody understands the etiquette of who stops and who does not. So let us put the ballroom away. Here is the real shape of the thing. A crossing is 6 days. 7 if the weather turns, and the weather often turns in October. 6 days in which you cannot leave, cannot walk further than about 400 feet in any direction, cannot post a letter, cannot receive one, cannot change your mind about anything at all. The ship carries you at 17 or 18 knots through water that is the color of wet slate, and the air on deck is cold and salted, and smells faintly of coal because the funnel smoke drifts aft when the wind is behind you, which it usually is going west, which is why going west takes longer. The world contracts to the length of a promenade deck. There are perhaps 200 people in first class, and something over 1,000 below, and you will not meet the 1,000. You will see the same 40 faces at the same tables at the same hours, and by the 3rd day, you will know which of them chews with the mouth open, and which of them has a laugh that carries the whole length of the saloon. And you will have to go on being pleasant to both of them for another 72 hours with nowhere else to be. That is the first real fact of a crossing. Not luxury, confinement. Very expensive, very well upholstered confinement, in which the chief problem to be solved every single day is time itself, and the chief tool for solving it is ritual. Because the hours are fixed, and they are fixed for everybody. The bath steward knocks before 7. Breakfast is at 8, and the doors close. Bouillon comes round on deck at 11 in cups, whether you want it or not. The ship's position is posted at noon, and everybody drifts over to look at the number even if they cannot tell you what the number means. Luncheon at 1, tea at 4, you dress for dinner at 6. Dinner is at 7, and takes 2 hours, because it is meant to take 2 hours. There is coffee, and there is music, and then the men go one way, and the women go another. And at 10 or 10:30, the lights in the public rooms begin to go down, and there is nothing left to do but go to your berth and listen to the water sliding along the plating 3 inches from your ear. Nobody built that schedule to be charming. It was built to fill a day. Take the schedule away, and what you have is 6 days of a grey circle of horizon with nothing in it, and people who have never in their lives had to sit still. And the third fact, the one that matters most for what we are going to do tonight, is this. Nothing about the social order was left behind on the dock. It came aboard entire. It came aboard with the luggage. Ships in this period sorted people as strictly as any English county did, and rather more visibly, because the sorting was expressed in doors and stairways and painted lines across the deck planking. There is a barrier aft of the first-class promenade that you do not cross, and they do not cross. There is a companionway that leads down to where the second cabin passengers take their meals, and you have no reason to use it and will not. The people in steerage, who outnumber you 5 or 6 to 1 and are the actual financial engine of the voyage, occupy the fore part of the ship and the after part of the ship, and are essentially invisible from where you sit, which was a matter of deliberate design and not an accident of layout. Inside first class, the sorting goes on at a finer grain. The purser makes up the table plan before sailing, and where he puts you is a public statement about who the company believes you to be. A seat at the captain's table is a small social event, requested in advance, granted, or quietly not granted. A seat at the far end of the long table by the pantry door is also a statement, and everybody at the far end of the long table knows exactly what has been said to them, and nobody says a word about it, and they all go on passing the marmalade for 6 days. So this is not a party. This is a small, sealed, floating version of a society, running at 18 knots, with its own rules about who speaks first, and who may be introduced to whom, and how much you tip a bedroom steward at the end of it. And a woman travelling in first class is not a guest at that society. She is one of the people responsible for making it run. That is the part the picture with the staircase leaves out completely. In the picture, she is decorative. In life, she has a household of 5 to move 3,000 miles. 2 children, a lady's maid, a quantity of luggage divided between what can be reached during the voyage and what cannot, a wine account that will have to be settled with the purser, a set of tipping obligations that are unwritten and absolutely binding, jewellery that has to be lodged in the ship's safe and drawn out again each evening against a paper receipt, and 6 days of other people's company to be managed without a single visible seam. She will do all of it, and the whole point of doing it well is that it must look like nothing at all. It must look like she simply arrived and dressed and was pleasant and arrived again at the other end. We are going to watch that work being done. Hour by hour, from the tender at Liverpool to the pilot boat off Sandy Hook. We are going to look at what the ticket cost and what the maid earned and what the ship burned in coal every day to move you. We are going to open the trunks and sort the dresses and read the bill of fare aloud. All of it, the kidneys and the fin and haddock and the hothouse grapes. We are going to sit in a hired deck chair with a rug over the knees and watch a horizon that does not change, and we are going to find out what people actually did with those hours. Before we go, 2 small things. If you find these useful for sleeping, it does help enormously if you subscribe. It costs you nothing, and it is more or less the whole reason the channel keeps going. And I always like to know who is out there. If you are awake enough, leave a comment telling me where you are listening from and what time it is where you are. There is usually somebody at 2 in the morning in Manchester, and somebody at 9 in the evening in Sydney, and somebody who is not going to tell us where they are, and reading through them is one of the better parts of my week. Right? That is everything. Let the room go soft. Let your jaw unclench and your hands come open, and your breathing go long and slow and uninteresting. You are not being asked to picture anything in particular. If the pictures come, let them come, and if they blur into sleep partway through, that is exactly what this is for. We are going back to a wet dock in Liverpool in the first week of October, 1888. There is coal smoke lying flat over the river, and gulls making a great deal of noise about nothing, and a tender waiting at the landing stage to carry 200 people out to a ship lying at anchor in the stream, too big to come alongside. And one of those 200 people is you. You are 34 years old. You were born in the year the Great Exhibition opened, and you have lived your whole life in the north of England, and until this morning you had never been further from home than Paris. Your husband is a merchant, cotton mostly, brought in through Liverpool and sold on through Manchester, with a share in a warehouse and an interest in 2 smaller concerns that you understand better than he thinks you do. He is 41. He has crossed to New York twice before, and speaks about the passage in the tone men use for things they have survived and rather enjoyed. He is somewhere behind you at this moment, arguing pleasantly with a carter. You have 2 children with you. The elder is 9, a girl, and has been sick with excitement since Tuesday. The younger is 6, a boy, and has spent the last hour trying to get close enough to the edge of the landing stage to see the water move underneath it. You have a lady's maid, who is 26, who has never been on any ship at all, and who is standing very upright beside the hat boxes with the particular stillness of a person deciding not to be frightened in front of her employer. That is your household for the next 6 days, 5 people, in a floating hotel, among 1,500 strangers. Take a moment with where you are standing, because it is worth having. The Liverpool landing stage is a floating structure, half a mile of it, rising and falling with the tide on iron pontoons, so that the gangways are always at the right slope, no matter what the river is doing. Under your boots, the planking gives very slightly, and it moves, not much, but enough that your body has already begun making small corrections you are not aware of. The air smells of 3 things at once. Coal smoke, which is everywhere in this city, and lies over the water in a flat brown layer on a still morning. Wet rope, which is a smell like nothing else. Hemp and tar and salt together. And the river itself, the Mersey, which at low water smells of mud and cold. There are gulls. There are always gulls, and they are enormous, and they are shouting. Around you, there are perhaps 300 people who are not going anywhere at all, come down simply to watch, because the departure of a liner is free entertainment, and Liverpool has never stopped finding it interesting. There are boys selling newspapers, and boys selling nothing in particular. There is a man with a barrow of oranges doing excellent business, because somebody has told the entire dock that oranges are good for the sickness, and everybody believes it, and it is not true. And out in the stream, perhaps a quarter of a mile off, there is the ship. She's a little over 500 feet long. Iron hull, painted black to the waterline, and above it, white superstructure, 2 funnels in the company's colours, 4 masts still rigged for sail because, in 1888, no sensible owner has yet decided to trust engines entirely. She is lying to her anchor with a thread of smoke going up from the after funnel, and tugs fussing round her, and lighters alongside taking in the last of the cargo. She does not come to the dock. She is too deep for the berths, and too valuable to spend hours getting in and out of them. So she waits in the river, and the passengers are carried out to her. She looks, from here, very large and completely still. Both of those impressions will change. Now the money, because the money is the thing that explains everything else about where you are standing. Your husband has paid roughly £25 a head for the first-class passage. For the 2 of you and the 2 children, with the children at a reduced rate, the family's tickets have come to something in the region of £80. Your maid travels second cabin, which the company also calls intermediate, and that is another £9 or thereabouts. £89, then, for the crossing, before you have bought a single glass of wine on board. Hold that against what money means in the country you are leaving. A general domestic servant in a comfortable household in this city earns between £16 and £20 a year, with her food and her bed. A skilled engineering fitter, a good one, in full work, earns perhaps £130 in a year. A clerk in a shipping office might be on 90. So your family's tickets, one way, cost about what a clerk in one of your husband's own offices is paid for 12 months of his life. That is the first thing to understand about a first-class crossing. It is not expensive in the way a nice dinner is expensive. It is expensive in the way a year is expensive, and a great deal of the behavior you are about to see aboard that ship, the elaborateness of it, the dressing, the seating, the small savageries about who sits where, follows directly from the fact that everybody in that saloon has paid a year of somebody's life to be there, and would like it to have been noticed. Below you, in the steerage, in that same ship, on the same water, for the same 6 days, a passage costs £4, sometimes less. There will be 800 or 900 people down there. You will not see them. We will come back to that. Now the luggage, which is not a small matter, and is, this morning, entirely your responsibility. There are 11 pieces. This is not excessive. It is close to standard for a family of your position crossing for a stay of some months, and you have thought hard about every one of them. They divide into 2 kinds, and getting the division wrong is the single most common mistake a first crossing produces. There is baggage wanted on the voyage, and there is baggage for the hold. The hold trunks go down into the ship's baggage room this morning, and you will not see them again until New York. Not on the 2nd day, when you remember something. Not at all. They are stowed in tiers under other people's trunks, and the company will not dig them out for you and every guide to travel published in this decade says so in italics, and every voyage somebody tries anyway. So you have 7 pieces going below. 2 large flat-topped trunks of your own clothes, 1 of your husband's, 1 for the children's things, and 3 cases of household goods, linen, books, a case of your husband's papers, and you have 4 pieces coming with you into the accommodation. Your cabin trunk, which is a particular shape, made to slide under a berth or stand on end against a bulkhead and open like a small wardrobe. A hat box, a dressing case, and a hold-all with the rugs. Into the cabin, trunk goes everything the next 6 days require, and you have packed it the way a quartermaster packs, because the room you are going to has approximately the floor space of a modest larder, and there is no second chance. 2 dresses for the deck, wool dark because salt spray marks anything pale. 2 dinner dresses, underclothing for 6 days plus 2, because things will be wanted. Boots, shoes, a pair of list slippers for the cabin. Shawls, because the North Atlantic in October is cold, in a way people who have only been to the Mediterranean do not expect. Your writing case, the children's books, medicines, a small store of dry biscuits. The lettering on the hold pieces matters too. Every trunk has been painted or labelled with your husband's initial and surname, and on landing, the customs sheds sort passengers' baggage into piles by the first letter of the surname. And you will stand under a great painted letter on the pier at the North River, waiting for 11 objects to appear out of a mountain of 4,000. Which is why, this morning, you have counted them twice. Here is the thing about all of this that I want to put down plainly before we go aboard, because it will shape everything that follows. Almost everyone who imagines a first-class crossing imagines leisure. The word people reach for is holiday. 6 days with nothing to do, the sea going past, an enforced rest. That is not what this is, and it is very nearly the opposite of what this is. What you are doing this week is running a household. The household has simply changed address. It has moved from a house in Cheshire with a cook and a housemaid and a garden and known tradesmen into 2 connecting rooms on a ship with an unfamiliar staff you do not employ and cannot dismiss, and a 9-year-old who is going to be bored by Wednesday, and a maid who is going to be ill by tomorrow lunchtime, and a set of social obligations that begin at breakfast on the first morning and do not stop until the pilot boat comes. You will manage money on this ship. There is an account at the purser's office for wine and mineral water and the deck chairs, and it will be settled at the end, and you will be the one who knows what is on it. You will manage servants, yours and the ship's, and the ships are the harder problem, because the only lever you have on a steward is the envelope you give him on the last night, and everyone knows it, and the whole 6 days are quietly shaped by that knowledge on both sides. You will manage placement, meaning who your family sits with at every meal for 6 days, which is decided in the next 20 minutes, and cannot be changed afterwards without insult. You will manage the children's whereabouts on a structure with unfenced edges. You will manage acquaintance, deciding which of the strangers now boarding the tender with you are people to be known, and which are people to be pleasantly avoided in an enclosed space for a week. And the whole point, the entire object, is that none of it should show. That is the work. It is not the ship's engines, and it is not the cotton in the hold. It is the continuous, invisible, unrecorded labor of making a complicated arrangement of people and money look like an ocean voyage that simply happened to go smoothly. The tender's bell goes. She is a paddle steamer, wooden benches, no shelter to speak of, and she will take 20 minutes to cross the stream. You count the pieces once more. 11. You take your son's hand off the railing, and you go aboard. The tender comes up under the ship's side, and the ship stops being a shape on the water and becomes a wall. That is the first thing nobody tells you about a liner, and it does not matter how many times you have crossed. From the landing stage she was long and low and rather elegant. Black hull, white deck houses, 2 buff funnels raked back. And now she is a cliff of riveted iron running away in both directions, with the rivets standing out in rows like stitching. And you are looking up at a row of faces along the rail 4 decks above you. And the gangway comes down at an angle that makes your maid take hold of her skirt with both hands. The smell changes as you climb. On the tender it was river water and coal and wet wood. Halfway up it becomes hot metal and steam, and underneath that, something sweetish and faintly sickening that is the galley ventilators and the paint together. And then you step through the entry port into the alleyway, and it is a different climate altogether. Warm, close, windless, and it smells overwhelmingly of varnish. New varnish on this ship. She has been in service 11 months. Everything is polished to a degree that will never be repeated in her working life. And the smell of it is in the paneling and the doors and the handrails. And by the 3rd day, you will not notice it at all. And on the 4th day, you will step out onto the deck and come back in and notice it again, freshly, and be a little surprised. A steward takes your cabin baggage checks and leads you aft. The alleyway is narrower than you expect, and lit with electric lamps in frosted globes at intervals, which is new enough that you look at them. The carpet underfoot is dark red and thin, doors on either side, numbered, each with a small brass frame beside it, holding a card. And the cards have names on them. And you read them as you pass, because everybody does. And the reading of the door cards is the first act of shipboard society. Your stateroom is number 31, starboard side, amidships. Amidships matters, and you paid for it, though it is not itemized anywhere. The motion is least in the middle of a ship, and worst at the ends. And the people who know this book amidships, and the people who do not book forward, because the numbers are lower and think they have done well. The room is 9 feet by 11. That is a generous first-class stateroom in the year 1888. And if that number sounds small, it is because you are picturing a bedroom on land, which is the wrong comparison entirely. Compare it instead to a railway compartment you would sit in for 11 hours, and it becomes enormous, and it is yours for 6 days. Here is what is in it, and it is worth going slowly, because almost every object in this room has been designed by somebody who has thought hard about what happens when a room is tilted 30 degrees and then tilted the other way, and then does it again for 400,000 times in a week. 2 berths, one above the other, in mahogany, built into the ship's side. The lower berth has a lee board, which is a hinged panel of wood along the open edge that can be raised and pegged upright, so that the occupant is in a shallow box and cannot roll out. The mattress is horsehair over a sprung base, and the bedding is company linen, changed twice in the passage. There is a curtain on a rod that can be drawn across the whole face of the berths, and it is heavier than it looks, because a light curtain would swing. The washstand is marble-topped and set into a mahogany cabinet, and around 3 edges of the marble runs a raised wooden lip about 2 inches high. That is a fiddle rail. There are fiddle rails on every horizontal surface in this room, and there will be fiddle rails on the dining tables. And in a fortnight, you will be back in a house on land and set a glass down near the edge of a table and feel a small wrong absence. Under the washstand, there is a tip-out basin that empties into a lead-lined tank, and beside it a rack, gimbaled, that holds the water carafe and 2 glasses so that they stay upright as the ship rolls. There is a folding table hinged to the bulkhead. There is a sofa along one side, upholstered in figured plush, which converts, and which will be your maid's problem to make up if the sea is bad, and one of the children will not sleep alone. There is a mirror with a brass rail across it. There is a rack overhead for small parcels, and a hook, and a strip of carpet, and a chamber pot in a cupboard, because the lavatories are at the end of the alleyway and shared. There is an electric bell push beside the lower berth, and it is worth understanding exactly what that push does, because it is the whole architecture of the voyage in one small piece of brass. You press it. A shutter drops on an indicator board in the pantry at the end of the alleyway, showing the number 31, and a bell rings there, and it goes on showing 31 until somebody comes and resets it. Your bedroom steward is responsible for a set of rooms on this alleyway, perhaps a dozen of them, and he is on call from before 6 in the morning until the last passenger has gone to bed. He will bring tea, he will bring a basin, he will bring hot water, he will bring beef tea and biscuit if you are ill, he will take shoes away to be cleaned and bring them back at some hour when you did not see him. On a still night, the bell push seems a convenience. On the 3rd night, when the ship is working and half the alleyway is unwell, and the indicator board is showing 5 numbers at once, it is something else. He earns perhaps £3 and 10 shillings a month, and he expects the envelope on the last night, and he is quietly and correctly aware from the first hour of who is likely to be careless with it. 2 seamen bring in your cabin trunks, and this is where the actual work of the afternoon begins. The distinction is simple, and you have already made it in a cold bedroom in Manchester 4 days ago, with lists. Cabin baggage stays with you. Hold baggage goes down into the baggage room and is not seen again until New York. And no argument, no charm, no application to the purser will get it out at sea. So the question you settled at home was, what does a family of 5 require for 144 hours in a room 9 feet by 11, with no shops? 11 pieces came aboard with you. 4 are down in the hold. The 2 large flat trunks with the dresses that will be needed in New York, the case of your husband's papers and sample books, and the box of gifts. 7 are here, or in the maid's cabin, or in the children's, and they are here because everything in them will be wanted before Sandy Hook. You take off your gloves and hat and get to it, and the maid works with you. And for the next hour and a half, the two of you make 100 small decisions about hanging space. There is no wardrobe. There is a shallow hanging cupboard, the depth of a coat, and a row of hooks. So the dresses have to be considered by the day. The wool serge, which is a deck dress, dark, hard-wearing, indifferent to salt and cold smuts, and it will be worn every morning of the passage, and it will hang on the outermost hook because it will be reached for first. 2 dinner dresses, because you will change every evening at 5:30 and be seen doing it. And 2 is thought sufficient for 6 days if the trimmings are altered and the accessories change. A tea gown, loose, which is the only forgiving garment aboard, and which will be blessed by the 3rd day. A wrapper for the cabin, and a heavy ulster, and a rug for the deck chair, because whatever the weather is at Liverpool, it will be different in mid-Atlantic. You put the shoes in the flat space beneath the sofa. You put the medicine case in the rack, where you can reach it lying down, and you check it, and it is chlorodyne and sal volatile, and a bottle of brandy, and a tin of plain biscuits, and none of it will do very much. And you take it anyway, because everybody does. Above you, a bugle goes, and then a bell, and the alleyway fills with the sound of the last visitors being put off the ship. You go up. It is nearly 5, and the light is going out of the Mersey, and the tugs have her, 2 ahead and 1 under her quarter, and the ship comes off the buoy and swings her bow down the river with no sensation at all, except that the shore begins to travel sideways. The wind comes across the deck properly for the first time, and it is cold, and it smells of river mud and coal. There are people at the rail 3 deep, and there is very little talking. Then, under your feet, through the planking, and up through the soles of your boots and into your knees, the engines start in earnest. It is not a noise exactly. It is a rhythm you feel first in the deck, and then in the rail under your hands. A fast, steady beat with a slight tremble laid over it. And it will not stop again until the pilot boards off Sandy Hook. Every glass on this ship will hum faintly for 6 days. Every hanging garment will sway a fraction of an inch. Always, all night, in an hour, you will have stopped hearing it. And on the last morning, it will cut off in the North River, and the silence will be so sudden and so wrong that you will wake up out of a sound sleep. The Liverpool lights go small behind. Then they are a smudge. Then they are a suspicion of orange under the cloud. And then they are not there. And it is properly dark and properly cold, and the deck is emptying. Later, in the berth, with the lee board up, and the curtain drawn, and the ship going out past the skerries into the open, you lie on your side with your ear perhaps 18 inches from the iron plating of the hull, and you listen to the sea go past. It is closer than it has any business being. It is a long, continuous rush with a knock in it, and every so often a heavier note as she puts her shoulder into something. And then the rush again. Somewhere aft, a loose thing taps in a locker. Somewhere forward, the anchor cable stirs in its pipe. The whole vessel makes small sounds, working, adjusting, the way a house does at night, except that a house was not being carried across 3,000 miles of water while it does it. You put your hand flat on the cold painted iron beside your head, and you feel the sea on the other side of it. And you go to sleep. The knock comes at 7:30. 2 soft raps, and a voice through the door that does not wait for an answer. "Your bath is ready, madam." He's already gone by the time you have got the curtain back. The bath steward works a corridor of perhaps 20 staterooms, and he has been at it since 6, and he has learned that a knock and a sentence is enough, because the alternative is standing outside a door in an alleyway, conducting a conversation with a woman who is not dressed. You put on a wrapper and slippers. The alleyway is warm and smells of varnish and hot metal, and faintly of the boiled coffee that has begun somewhere below. The floor is not still. It is not rough either, this first full morning out, but there is a long, slow lean to it, a lift and a settle that takes perhaps 8 seconds end to end, and you find that your hand goes out to the handrail along the panelling without your deciding it should. That rail is there because everyone's hand does that. In 2 days, you will be walking this passage, carrying a book and a shawl, and not touching the rail at all, and you will not remember learning how. The bathroom is a small, white-painted room with a heavy door and a marble-topped tub set into a wooden surround, and the tub is full of hot seawater. It is not clear. It has a faint green cast to it in the depth, and a slight film of steam on top, and it smells of the sea, which is to say of iodine and cold stone, and something a little like the inside of an oyster shell, except that it is hot, which makes the smell strange. Beside the tub, on a small stand, is a large white enamel can with a cloth over it. That can holds perhaps 2 gallons of fresh water, and it is warm, and it is for rinsing, and it is all you get. This is worth slowing down for, because it explains a great deal about how a ship of this period actually lived. A liner in 1888 cannot carry enough fresh water for the people aboard to use it freely. She is carrying something over 1,000 souls between passengers and crew. And if each of them drew even 10 gallons a day for drinking, cooking, washing, and laundry, you are asking the ship to sail with something like 400 tons of water in her tanks, and to keep adding to it. Water is dead weight. It occupies space that could hold coal, or cargo, or paying berths. So the tanks are filled at Liverpool with as much as the ship can sensibly stow. And then the ship makes the rest of it herself from the sea by boiling it. The evaporator is a machine in the engine room that takes seawater, boils it with steam, bled off the boilers, and condenses the vapor back into fresh water, leaving the salt behind. It works. It works reliably, but it costs coal to run, and the coal is the single largest expense of the crossing. And the water it makes has a flat, cooked taste that people of the period complained about constantly and drank anyway. Every gallon of fresh water on this ship represents a small measured amount of Welsh coal shoveled into a furnace by a man who will never see the inside of this bathroom. So you bathe in the sea, which is free, pumped up in unlimited quantity, heated by the same steam. And the sea does not lather. This is the part that surprises anyone who has not tried it. Ordinary soap is made with sodium, and the calcium and magnesium dissolved in seawater react with it and throw down a grey curd instead of a foam. You can work a cake of pears into a cloth for a full minute and produce nothing but a slick, and then find the curd of it clinging to your arms afterwards, like a fine dust. The companies knew this. There is a second cake in the dish, marked salt water soap, made with different oils and a good deal of coconut oil in particular, and it will lather in the sea after a fashion, and it will leave you smelling like a chandler's shop. You use it. Everyone uses it. And then you stand and pour the fresh can over your shoulders and your hair and get the salt off, and the 2 gallons are gone in about 40 seconds. And that is the entire fresh water portion of your morning. Your hair will be brittle for the whole passage. Every woman aboard knows this. There is nothing to be done about it beyond brushing and a little oil, and it is one of the small reasons why a crossing is followed, for those who can afford it, by a day of doing nothing at all in a hotel on the other side. Back in the stateroom, the maid has the light on and the trunk lid up, and she has already been to the pantry once. The dress is decided before you say anything, because you decided it last night, and she remembers. It is the wool serge, the dark bottle green one, because this morning is a deck morning, and wool serge is what you wear on a deck. Then the dressing begins, and it takes rather better than half an hour, and it goes in an order that has not changed in years, and will not change because you are at sea. Combinations first, the chemise and drawers made in one piece. Linen, because linen does not hold the damp the way cotton does, and everything aboard holds damp. Stockings, wool, gartered above the knee. Then the corset, and this is the part that requires 2 people, or at least is very much easier with 2. It goes on loosely fastened at the front busk, and the maid takes the laces at the back and works them from the middle outward in a steady pull, and you hold the edge of the berth and breathe out when she says, and it takes perhaps 90 seconds. It is not the instrument of torture the last century has been taught to imagine. It is a fitted garment made to your measurements by a woman in a shop off Bold Street, and its real function is structural, because everything you are about to put on hangs from it rather than from your shoulders. Without it, the weight of the skirts would be carried entirely by your waist and hips, and that is genuinely unpleasant. With it, the weight is spread across your whole trunk. On a moving deck, it does something else as well, which nobody wrote down but every woman aboard knew, which is that it gives you a rigid center. It makes you harder to unbalance. Corset cover over it, then the petticoats, and there are 3 of them this morning. A flannel one for warmth, a plain one over that, and a stiffened one to carry the shape of the skirt. Then the skirt itself, hooked at the waist, and the bodice, which fastens up the front with 18 small covered buttons. And the maid does them because you cannot see the bottom 4, and the ship is leaning. A brooch at the throat, boots buttoned with a hook, a shawl over the arm, and gloves in the pocket, because you will want both within 10 minutes of going up, and you will not come back down for them. Consider the woman doing all this, because she is the second person in the room, and she has had a considerably worse night than you have. Her wages are somewhere between £28 and £35 a year, found, which means her food and her lodging come on top of the money. She is not a young girl. A lady's maid is a senior servant, ranking with the housekeeper and the cook, and she has spent years learning to dress hair, to launder lace, to clean a silk with breadcrumbs and a gauze with magnesia, to remove a grease spot from wool with benzene without burning the fabric or herself, to alter a hem overnight, to pack a trunk so that nothing creases. She can do things with a needle that a dressmaker charges by the hour for. She is, in the plainest terms, a skilled tradeswoman, and she has no trade to go back to when she is 50. At sea, her work gets harder in every direction at once. Her cabin is in second class, an inside berth she shares with 2 other women, one of whom is a nurse to somebody's children, and gets up at 5. She has no fresh water allowance to speak of for laundry. She has to press your dinner dress with flat irons heated on a stove in a pantry 3 decks down, and carry them back up through alleyways that are moving. And she will do that every afternoon of this voyage. She has to keep your things dry in a climate that is entirely damp. She has to be available in your cabin at 7 in the morning, and again at 5 in the afternoon, and again at 11 at night. And the hours in between are not hers, because she will be mending, sponging, brushing, and standing about. And she is not being paid a penny more for any of it. There is no sea allowance. There is no overtime. The company charged your husband about £12 for her passage in second class, and that is the whole of the additional expense of bringing her, and the additional labour is simply absorbed, the way it is absorbed at home. You know some of this, and not all of it. You know she was up before you. You do not know what time. It has not occurred to you to ask, and it will not occur to you. And if it did occur to you, the asking would embarrass you both. She hands you the shawl. She says the weather looks fine. You say you hope it holds. Out in the alleyway, the electric lamps have been turned down because the daylight has arrived through the skylights, and the whole ship looks different from the way it looked last night. You come up the short stair and out into the saloon and see it properly for the first time by daylight, and it is a great long room with a ceiling of ground glass above and the sun coming through it in a flat white sheet, and 80 people are eating breakfast under it, and every one of them looks up as you come in. They look up because everyone always looks up. It is not rudeness. On the 4th morning, nobody will look up at all, and by the 6th morning, the same 80 faces will have become as ordinary to you as the faces at your own parish church. But this is the first full day of the passage, and the room is still sorting itself out, and every arrival is information. The dining saloon runs nearly the full width of the ship at this level, and it is longer than it is wide by a good deal. 2 long tables run fore and aft down its length, with shorter tables set crosswise at either end. The tables are covered in white damask that has been laid on damp, which you will not understand until later in the week. Down the centre of each table runs a low wooden rail, not more than 2 inches high, screwed into the wood, and set into it are round holes of 2 sizes. The larger holes hold the water carafes. The smaller ones hold the cruets and the little cut glass jars of preserve. Above your head, running the length of the table, hangs a rack of dark polished wood in which the wine glasses and tumblers stand upside down in their own sockets, swaying very slightly, all of them together, all in the same direction at the same moment. The chairs are the thing that tells you most plainly where you are. They are heavy mahogany with red plush seats, and they do not move. Each one is mounted on an iron pillar bolted through the deck, and the seat swivels on that pillar so that you can turn it aside to sit down and turn it back to face the table. You cannot draw your chair in. You cannot push it back. You sit where the shipbuilder decided you would sit, at the distance he decided, And if you are a small woman, you will spend 6 days leaning forward slightly to reach your plate. And if you are a large man, you will spend 6 days with the table edge against you. Nobody complains about it, because the alternative is a room full of loose furniture in a seaway. And everybody understands that. A steward pulls the chair round for you, and you sit, and the children are settled either side, and the bill of fare is put into your hand on a stiff card printed that morning in the ship's own printing office, 3 decks below, by a man who prints the bills of fare, the concert programs, the daily run notices, and the passenger lists, and who is at sea for that purpose alone. The card is longer than you expect. There is porridge with cream. There is Finnan haddock, and fresh herrings, and fried whiting. There are mutton chops, and rump steak, and grilled kidneys, and bacon, and a dish of curried fowl. There are eggs done 4 ways. There is cold roast beef, and cold ham, and a galantine of veal. There are buckwheat cakes with syrup, which are there for the Americans, and which the English passengers regard with polite suspicion. There are hot rolls, and toast, and Scotch scones, and a compote of stewed fruit, and there is a dish of hothouse grapes, and a few pears. You are not expected to eat 1/10 of it. Nobody is. The length of the card is not a promise about your appetite. It is a statement about the ship. Here is what that statement rests on. Below you, forward of the engine spaces, the vessel carries an ice house packed with rough ice cut from lakes and rivers in the winter, and stored under sawdust. And in it hang the carcasses and the fish, and the game for the whole passage out. There are live animals aboard as well, in pens on the forward well deck under a tarpaulin, because a cow gives milk for the children, and a coop of hens gives eggs, and neither of those things travels well any other way in 1888. The hothouse fruit came aboard at Liverpool in wooden boxes, lined with wadding, and it was grown under glass in Cheshire or the Channel Islands, and it will be gone by the 4th day, and the grapes on the 5th morning will be the last of them, and will be quietly offered only at the captain's end of the room. The whole card is a countdown. It is at its most generous this morning, and it will thin politely and almost invisibly every day until New York. Now look along the table, because the seating is not accidental, and everybody in the room knows it is not accidental. Weeks before the ship sailed, the purser received letters. Some came from passengers directly, and some came through the company's offices in Liverpool and London, and they all said, in careful and roundabout language, the same thing, which was that the writer would be gratified to be placed at the captain's table, or failing, that near it. The purser holds the table plan. He is a company officer with a clerk's ledger and a small locked office off the alleyway. And in practical terms, for 6 days, he is the most socially consequential man aboard, more so than the captain, who is on the bridge and appears at dinner and is otherwise a rumour. The plan he draws is a piece of arithmetic. A title outranks money, but recent money in a large enough quantity can be placed opposite a title without offence to either. A member of Parliament goes high. A bishop goes high. A well-known American family with a name the English passengers will recognise goes high, and a well-known American family with a name they will not recognise goes lower, whatever the fortune behind it. A woman travelling without her husband is placed with care. Merchants go to the middle of the long tables, and clergymen and professional men below them, and a party of 5 with 2 children, which is what you are, goes where the numbers fit. You are about 1/3 of the way down the port table. That is not an insult, and it is not a compliment. It is a fact that will govern the shape of your week, because the table you are given is the society you are given. You will eat 4 meals a day with these people. You will have no means of changing places, since a request to move implies dissatisfaction with your neighbors, and the purser will grant it only for illness or for a quarrel that has already become audible. If the woman on your left is agreeable, you will have a pleasant crossing. If she is not, you will have 6 days of weather remarks and careful silences, and you will get very good at looking at the middle distance. The service comes down the table in a pattern you will learn by tomorrow. Each steward has a section of perhaps 8 or 10 passengers, and yours is a man of about 40, with a Liverpool accent flattened by years of speaking to strangers. And by the end of this meal, he will know that you take your tea strong, that the elder child will not eat fish, and that you would rather be asked twice than served something you did not want. He will not write any of it down. It is his trade to hold it in his head, along with the same set of facts about 9 other people, for 6 days, and then to forget all of it and learn a new set on the return passage. What he is paid for this is small. A saloon steward on a mail liner in these years earns something in the region of £3 a month, perhaps a little more if he is senior, and the company understands perfectly well that his real income is the money passengers hand him at the end of the voyage. So does he. So do you. The custom is settled, though nobody will say it out loud until the last evening. A gentleman travelling alone gives his table steward about 10 shillings for the passage. A family gives £1, sometimes rather more. The bedroom steward who cleans your cabin and brings your morning tea gets much the same, and the bath steward gets 5 shillings, and the deck steward who carries your chair and tucks your rug gets 5 shillings, and the smoke-room steward gets whatever the men in there decide among themselves, which is generally more than any of the others, for reasons the men do not examine. Add it together, and the tipping on a 6-day crossing for a party such as yours comes to something like £2 10 shillings, which is roughly what your maid earns in a month. It is not written on any ticket. It is not mentioned in the company's printed matter. You are simply expected to know it, and knowing it is one of the small proofs that you belong in this room. The steward sets down the porridge and the haddock and the pot of tea, and goes away without a sound, on the balls of his feet, the way they all walk. The woman on your left has been waiting for the food to arrive, so that she can begin. She is perhaps 50, in dark grey, with jet buttons, and she says that she is told it will be fine as far as the banks, but that one never knows after that. You say that you had hoped for a quiet passage. She says that she has crossed 9 times, and that she has learned to expect nothing. Her husband, she mentions, is in the Manchester trade, and they are going out because of a matter of business that will not resolve itself by letter. In that exchange, you have both done a great deal of work. She has told you that she is experienced, so you will not condescend to her. She has told you her husband's line, so you know her position within about £10 a year. You have told her nothing at all except that you are civil, which is itself an answer, because it means you are not going to be difficult. Neither of you has asked a direct question. Neither of you will, for at least another day. Opposite, a younger woman is buttering toast for a boy of about 7, and has not looked up once, and you understand at a glance that she is not going to be trouble either, and that the 3 of you will manage. You drink your tea. The rack of glasses overhead leans a few degrees to starboard, hangs there, and comes back. Breakfast ends without anyone announcing that it has ended. The saloon simply thins, chair by chair, and by 9:30, the stewards are clearing at the far tables, and you are climbing the wide staircase with your hand on the rail, because the rail is not decorative, and everyone aboard has already learned that. The doors at the head of the stairs are heavy and sprung, and the wind takes the first one out of your hand and slams it back against its stop. Then you are outside. The cold is not the cold of a Liverpool morning. It is wetter, and it is moving, and it comes at you from the port side in a steady press that flattens your skirt against your legs and makes your eyes water within seconds. The air smells of salt and of coal smoke, and the smoke is the surprising part, because it does not stay up where the funnels put it. It drifts aft and down, and there are stretches of the deck where you walk through a thin, sour warmth of it, and other stretches 30 feet further along, where the air is so clean it hurts. The horizon is empty. That is the thing no one tells you, and no painting can show you. Yesterday, there were the Welsh hills, and a scatter of coasters, and a lightship. This morning, there is a circle of grey water with the ship at the centre of it. And the circle is perhaps 8 or 9 miles across, and there is nothing in it. No sail, no smoke, nothing but the swell coming up from the southwest in long, low ridges, and the ship going over them one after another, with a patience that begins, after 10 minutes of watching, to feel like a personality. You walk. That is what the promenade deck is for, and everyone is doing it, in pairs mostly, up the port side and down the starboard, so that the traffic sorts itself into 2 thin streams, without anybody having agreed to it. Your deck chair is waiting for you halfway along the starboard side, in the lee of the deck house, where the wind eases. It is worth being precise about the deck chair, because it is one of those small arrangements that tells you nearly everything about how this ship is run. You did not bring it, and you do not own it. It is hired from the deck steward for the passage, at a fixed charge of about 4 shillings, paid once, covering the whole crossing. For that, you get a folding frame of teak and canvas, a name card slipped into a brass holder on the back so that no one else takes it, a rug of thick brown wool, and a cushion. The steward carries it out in the morning to whatever position you have asked for and takes it in at night. And if you want to move from the sheltered side to the sunny side, he will move it for you, and will remember for the rest of the voyage that you prefer the sunny side. 4 shillings. A housemaid ashore earns perhaps £16 a year, and the hire of a chair for 6 days costs 1/5 of a week of her wages. Nobody on this deck thinks about that, and neither will you again this morning. But it is the shape of the thing, and it is worth having said once. You sit. The steward comes at once with the rug, and shakes it out, and tucks it round your feet, with a competence that suggests he has done it 400 times since Saturday, and asks whether you would like beef tea at 11. And you say yes, because at 11 the beef tea comes round on a tray, whether you asked or not, and it is simpler to have agreed. And now you are settled, and the whole social machinery of the deck can begin to work on you. Here is the difficulty that shipboard life had to solve, and it is a genuine difficulty. Ashore, in the world you come from, you do not speak to a stranger. You are introduced. A hostess who knows you both performs the introduction in her own drawing room, and by doing it, she stakes her own reputation on the fact that the two of you are fit to know each other. That is what an introduction actually is. It is not a formality. It is a guarantee offered by a third person who can be blamed if it turns out badly. At sea, there is no hostess. There is a purser who arranged your table and who knows the names on the list. But a purser cannot vouch for anybody socially, and everyone understands that. So the whole system has to be improvised, out of nothing, twice a week, in a floating hotel where 600 or 700 people who have never met are locked together for a week and cannot leave. What the 1880s arrived at is an unwritten set of rules of remarkable subtlety. The table does the work of the hostess. Whoever the purser has seated beside you may be spoken to, and speaking to them is not forward. The deck extends this a little. A remark about the weather, offered to the occupant of the neighboring chair, is permitted because the weather is a subject that belongs to nobody and commits you to nothing. If the remark is answered in kind, you may make a second one tomorrow. If it is answered with a smile and no words, you will not make a second one, and no offence has been given or taken, and you will pass that person on the deck for 5 more days with a small nod and nothing else. A man may not open a conversation with a woman he has not been introduced to, but a woman may open one with him, and often does. And this is one of the few situations in the whole century where the initiative is formally hers. A woman travelling without her husband is spoken of as being under the captain's protection, which sounds sentimental and is in fact administrative. It means that if a fellow passenger becomes a nuisance, the matter is the captain's to settle, and the captain has the authority of a magistrate aboard his own ship, and is not shy of using it. And then there is the rule that makes all the others workable, and it is the one that always startles people when they hear it stated aloud. Shipboard acquaintance expires on landing. Everybody knows this. Nobody says it. You may spend 5 days in the next chair to a woman, learn the ages of her children, and the state of her mother's health, and her opinion of Mr. Gladstone, walk with her every morning, and sit beside her every evening. And then at the pier, you will shake hands and say how very pleasant it has been, and you will not write, and she will not call. And if you meet in a shop in 3 years' time, you will both hesitate for half a second, and then be extremely warm for 2 minutes, and then part. It sounds cold. It is not, quite. It is what makes the intimacy possible in the first place. Because the friendship has an ending built into it before it starts, both of you can afford to be more open than you would ever be ashore, where every acquaintance is a permanent entry in a ledger and must be weighed against every other. For 6 days, you can talk to a woman without calculating what knowing her will cost you. That is a rare freedom in this life, and the passengers on this deck understand exactly how rare it is, and they use it, and then they put it down at the pier and pick their ordinary caution back up along with their luggage. At about 11:15, your children come round the corner of the deckhouse at a speed that would not be permitted at home, and behind them, unhurried, comes the stewardess. She is a woman of perhaps 40, in a dark dress and a white apron, one of a handful of women in a crew of 200 and something. And her position aboard is peculiar and rather good. She is not a servant of yours. She is the company's, and she has authority in the nursery and on the deck that your own maid does not have. And she uses it. She has already established with your younger one that the rail is not to be climbed on, and that the rope barriers across the aft end of the deck are not suggestions. Children may be on the promenade deck at set hours. They may not go forward past the bridge deck. They may not go down the after companion. They may not go into the smoking room at any hour for any reason, and if they are sent to fetch their father from it, a steward will fetch him instead. Your elder is carrying a piece of coloured rope with a knot in it that a quartermaster has taught her, and is very pleased, and wants you to look at it now, immediately, and you look at it and admire it, and it is, as it happens, a properly made bowline. They go off again along the deck, and you watch the three of them until they turn the corner. Now consider what you are actually looking at, standing here on this stretch of teak with your rug over your knees. The ship carries somewhere near 2,000 people this passage. You are one of perhaps 200 in the first class. There are maybe 150 in the second. The rest, well over 1,500 of them, are in the steerage, forward and aft on the lower decks, and they have their own open space at the forward end and their own at the stern. And you will not enter either of those, and they will not enter this. Between you and them are ordinary doors. That is what is strange about it. Not walls, doors with a low gate or a rope across and a steward standing near, and no lock needed most of the time because nobody tries. The class geography of the ship is not enforced by iron. It is enforced by everybody agreeing in advance where the lines are, which is very much cheaper, and which is exactly how it works ashore as well. Over 6 days, you will glimpse them perhaps 4 times. A crowd forward at the rail as the ship leaves the river, washing on a line in the morning. Music from somewhere below on the second evening. A queue at the emigrants' hospital door. You will hear the engines that carry all of you, day and night, without pause. The steward arrives with the beef tea. It is very hot and slightly too salt, and you drink it and watch the empty grey circle of the world go by. The beef tea goes cold in your hands while you sit and feel the ship through the wood. That is the thing nobody mentions about a steamer, and nobody puts it in a painting either. The vibration, it comes up through the deck planks, into the frame of the chair, and into the small of your back, a fine, continuous shivering that never once stops from the moment the ship leaves the river until the moment she ties up on the far side. It is not violent. It is more like resting your hand on the flank of a very large animal that is breathing hard and has been breathing hard for days. After the first afternoon, you stop noticing it with your mind. Your body never stops noticing it. You will discover this on your third night ashore in New York, lying in a hotel bed that does not move at all, unable to sleep because the world has gone strangely dead underneath you. Look aft and up, and you can see the other evidence. The funnels, 2 of them buff-colored with black tops, and the smoke going away behind in a long, soft streak that lies flat over the water on a quiet morning and tears to rags when it blows. The color of the smoke changes through the day. Sometimes it is nearly clear. Sometimes it goes thick and dark for a few minutes together. And if you have been aboard 4 days, you have learned without being told that this means the firemen have just put on fresh coal and are working a fire down, and that the darkness will thin again shortly. At the stern, a thin line runs out over the taffrail into the wake, and every so often a young officer comes aft and hauls it in, hand over hand, and reads a small brass instrument at the end of it, and writes something in a book, and lets it stream out again. That is the log. It measures how far the ship has run through the water. Nobody explains it to you. You work it out by watching. Here is something worth slowing down for, because the machinery under your feet is the entire reason this voyage exists in the shape it does. 50 years before this, crossing the Atlantic meant sail, and it meant 5 weeks if the wind was kind, and 9 if it was not, and no one could tell you in advance which it would be. A sailing packet did not have a timetable in any meaningful sense. It had a season and a hope. What the engine did was not simply make the crossing faster. It made the crossing predictable. That is the more radical change of the two. A merchant can plan around predictable. A merchant cannot plan around hope. Down below, 3 or 4 decks under the chair you are sitting in, are the engines that do it. In a ship of this generation, they are compound engines, or on the newest boats coming out of the Clyde and the Tyne, triple expansion. The principle is straightforward enough to state, whatever it took to build. Steam comes from the boilers at high pressure and pushes a piston in a narrow cylinder. It has done work, but it is not finished. It is still hot and still has push left in it. So instead of throwing it away, the engine passes it into a second cylinder, a wider one, where the lower pressure can still shove a bigger piston. In a triple expansion engine, it goes on into a third, wider still. 3 squeezes out of the same steam. The result is that a ship burns markedly less coal for the same speed, and that changes the whole economics of the ocean, because coal is the thing that eats the profit. Even so, this ship burns something in the neighborhood of 250 tons of coal a day. On a 6-day passage that is 1,500 tons gone, converted into smoke and heat, and the shivering in the chair under you. The bunkers were filled at Liverpool by men working through the night, with baskets and barrows, and a great deal of noise. And by the time you reach Sandy Hook, they will be close to empty, and the ship will sit higher in the water than she did. That coal does not move itself. Feeding it is done by hand, entirely by 2 grades of men. The trimmers work back in the bunkers, filling barrows in the dark and running them forward. And as the bunker empties, they must go further and further in to get at what is left in a space that is hot and confined and never still. They hand off to the firemen, who work the furnace doors. A fireman's watch is 4 hours. In that time, he opens a door onto a fire, breaks the clinker with a long iron slice, rakes it, and shovels in fresh coal. and then does the next furnace, and the next, and comes back round to the first. The heat at the plates is not describable in a useful way. The men themselves simply said it was hot, and drank oatmeal water by the gallon, and came up at the end of the watch to sit in the air near the fiddly grating in whatever weather there was, steaming. There are somewhere near 150 men in the engine and boiler departments of a ship like this. There are perhaps 20 or 30 in the deck department. The romantic idea of a ship is sailors. The reality of a steamer in 1888 is that most of the crew are, in effect, working underground. Now the money, because the numbers are the part that tells you what the thing was for. A liner of this class cost the company somewhere between £300,000 and £500,000 to build. That is an enormous sum. It is the sort of figure that only makes sense if you spread it across 2 decades of crossings, and if you fill the ship on every one of them. So the question every steamship company lived with was simply this: who is going to be aboard, and what will each of them pay? You paid roughly £25. The 200 people in the first class are between them worth something around £5,000 on this crossing. The second class, at perhaps £9 a head, add something over 1,000. And the steerage, all 1,500 of them, at £4 or a little more each, are worth £6,000 or better. Read those numbers again, because they run against the whole story the ship tells about itself. The grand staircase is not what pays for the ship. The steerage is what pays for the ship. 200 people in mahogany and electric light are being carried, in strict commercial terms, by 1,500 people on the lower decks eating out of tin bowls. The first class exists partly because it makes money, and very largely because it makes reputation. And reputation is what fills the steerage berths, because an emigrant choosing a line reads the same newspapers everybody else does, and books the ship that is known to be fast and known to be safe. The luxury is advertising. The traffic below is the trade. Nobody says this at your table. It is in every company balance sheet. There is one more thing the engines pay for, and it is the thing the passengers care about most, which is speed. Speed is the whole competition between the lines. A ship that can do the passage in 6 days instead of 7 wins the mail contract, wins the newspaper columns, and wins the booking of every commercial traveller who is counting his days. And speed is expensive in a way that is almost absurd, because coal consumption does not rise gently with speed. It rises brutally. To get one more knot out of a ship, you may burn 1/3 again as much coal. Every extra half-day saved is bought with hundreds of tons, which brings us back to the deck, and to the small ritual that has been building all morning. At noon, if the sun shows at all, the officers take their sights from the bridge wing with sextants, and the ship's position is worked up. And the run since yesterday noon is calculated and chalked on a board near the companionway. 431 miles. 408. 446 on a good day, with a following sea, and a small crowd gathers to read it, which is odd if you think about it, because the number changes nothing whatever about anyone's day, except that money has been laid on it. The pool is run out of the smoking room, and it works like this. The evening before, tickets are sold on the numbers. each ticket covering one possible mileage figure, and the numbers likely to come up are drawn by lot or auctioned outright to the highest bidder. A ticket might cost £1. A serious bidder chasing a likely number might go to 5 or 10. Whatever the whole pool comes to goes to the holder of the winning figure, less a percentage set aside for the seaman's charity, which is always announced with some ceremony and is genuinely paid. A good pool on a full ship runs to £30 or £40. A remarkable one runs to a great deal more, which means a man in the smoking room may win, on a single guess about the weather, more than the stewardess who makes up his bed will earn in a year. Your husband bought a ticket on the second evening, and has not mentioned whether it did anything, which tells you it did not. The chalk goes up on the board. 422. A man in a check ulster says, "Well, that's that," in the voice of somebody who has just lost £1 and would like it understood that he did not mind. Somebody else says, "The wind has gone round, and we shall do better tomorrow." 2 women look at the board, look at each other, and decide together that they do not know what a good figure would be, and are not going to pretend. The little crowd thins out. The deck chairs fill again. The steward comes along the line with a jug and refills what wants refilling, and the funnel smoke goes on streaming away behind, and 422 miles of grey water lie somewhere astern, where nobody will ever look for them. The change begins so quietly that you notice the response before you notice the cause. It is the middle of the afternoon, and the deck steward, who has spent 3 days moving at the pace of a man with nothing much to do, goes along the line of chairs collecting rugs. He does it politely and without explanation. When you ask, he says only that it may come on to blow a little later, madam, and that the rugs are better dry. The barometer stands in a brass case at the head of the main companionway, where any passenger may look at it, and where almost no passenger knows what he is looking at. You have learned this much on previous crossings. The needle itself matters less than the direction it has moved since morning. A steward chalks the reading on a small slate twice a day beside the noon run. This morning, the figure was 29.8. By 4 in the afternoon, it is 29.4, and an elderly gentleman who has crossed a great many times looks at it, makes a small sound in his throat, and goes below to his cabin without saying anything to anybody. That sound is the most reliable weather forecast available to you. There is no other. In 1888, there is no telegraph at sea, no report from a ship 300 miles ahead, no chart of the system coming up from the southwest. The captain knows what his glass tells him, what the sky and the swell tell him, and what the season tells him, which is that the North Atlantic in October does this. He alters nothing about the ship's course. He simply prepares the ship, and the preparation of the ship is the thing you actually watch happen, because it happens in the rooms where you live. The first sign in the saloon is the tablecloths. At dinner, they are damp. Not wet, but damped through with fresh water before laying, so that plates and glasses take a grip on the cloth instead of sliding on the polished linen. The second sign is the racks. They are called fiddles, and they are wooden lattices, laid onto the table and fitted around the edges, dividing the whole surface into compartments about the size of a dinner plate. Once the fiddles are shipped, a plate cannot travel. It can only tilt against a wooden bar and come back. Every glass goes into a hole cut for it. The wine bottle stands in a slotted rack of its own, and the stewards carry the soup in low bowls filled 2/3 full instead of 3/4, which is the kind of detail nobody has ever explained to you, and everybody aboard understands. There are fewer people at your table, not many fewer. 2 chairs, and one of those is a child. Nobody remarks on it. To remark on it would be to make it an event, and the entire manner of a first-class saloon in weather is built on the principle that nothing whatever is happening. By 9 that evening, it is quite plainly happening. You feel it first in your feet, in the alleyway outside the saloon, where the deck lifts against your soles, and then goes soft under them. The ship has been rolling all week in a small way, the way a cradle rocks, 10 or 12 degrees and back, an easy motion you stopped noticing on the second day. This is a different thing. There is a long, slow lean to starboard that goes further than you expect, and then keeps going a little further still, and pauses and comes back, and the coming back has weight in it. You learn to count. Everyone aboard learns to count, and nobody teaches it to anybody. From the top of one roll to the top of the next is somewhere near 14 seconds, and once you have the number in your body, you can walk. You wait at the top, cross while she is level, and hold something at the bottom. There is a handrail down both sides of every alleyway, polished mahogany, screwed to the paneling at the height of a woman's hand, and it is not decorative. Every doorway has a hook and eye to latch it open and a catch to hold it shut, and both are used, because a door swinging free in a seaway is a serious nuisance and can be worse. In the cabin, your maid has already been through the room. The trunks under the berth are wedged with the smaller cases. The water bottle and the tumbler have gone into the fiddle rail on the washstand, which you looked at on the first night and thought was a pretty piece of joinery. It is not joinery. It is a low wooden fence around 3 sides of a marble slab, and it exists because on a night like this, everything on that slab wants to be on the floor. Your brushes are in the drawer. The looking-glass is fixed. The trunk lids are strapped. The lamp swings. This is the detail that will stay with you afterward more than the noise, because the lamp does not swing at all. It hangs plumb, dead upright, burning steady, and the entire cabin swings around it. Gimbals, they are called. 2 brass rings pivoted at right angles, and every lamp in a first-class stateroom hangs in them, and every compass, and the little rack that holds the water carafe. The effect at 2 in the morning, half awake in a berth, is that the room has quietly decided to move, and the flame has refused. You put up the leeboard. It is a shaped panel of mahogany that lifts out of a slot along the open side of the berth, and stands about a foot proud of the mattress, and it turns the bed into a box. Without it, you would spend the night, bracing with an elbow and a knee. With it, you are wedged, and can sleep, and do sleep, in pieces. The sounds arrange themselves into a pattern within an hour, and after that you can name them all. Underneath is the engine, unchanged, that same steady beat that has been in the floor since Liverpool. Over it is the sea running along the hull, and the hull is perhaps 18 inches from your ear on the other side of the panelling and the plate, so the water is not a distant sound, but a sound in the room with you, rushing aft, going quiet, rushing again. Then there is a heavier note when she puts her bow down and takes water over the forward deck. A thump you feel in the bunk boards. And then, from somewhere out in the pantry, the small, unmistakable sound of crockery moving in a rack. A slow chatter of china against china, which starts on the roll and stops at the top of it. Nobody gets up to see to it. It goes on all night. In the morning, you find the world has become smaller by about 2/3. The promenade deck is shut, not locked, but the doors to the open air on the weather side are latched, and a steward stands somewhere near enough to say, with perfect courtesy, that the captain would prefer the ladies to keep to the leeward side this morning, and that the sea is coming over forward. From the shelter of the companion doorway, you can see about 8 feet of streaming teak, a sky the colour of a slate roof, and grey water with white going across it in long, ragged streaks. That is the whole visible world. There is no horizon, because the horizon is only visible from the top of a roll, and by then you are holding on and not looking. So the day is spent below, and the day is very long. Perhaps 1/3 of the passengers do not come to breakfast. Seasickness aboard a liner is treated with a kind of brisk practicality that would surprise anyone who imagines the Victorians made a drama of illness. It is understood to be ordinary. It is understood to pass. The stewardess brings dry biscuits and a cup of beef tea to the cabin without being sent for, because she has done this on every westbound October crossing of her working life and knows exactly which cabins will want it. The advice of the period, printed in the little guides that shipping companies handed out, is worth almost nothing, and everyone gives it anyway. Lie down. Do not lie down. Go on deck. Eat nothing. Eat something dry. Take champagne, which was genuinely recommended and genuinely popular. Take a preparation of bromide, which the ship's surgeon will dispense, and which does very little. The one piece of advice that actually helps is the one that sounds least medical, which is to get amidships and low down, where the motion is smallest, and to stay there. You are not ill this time. You were ill on your first crossing, thoroughly and for 2 days, and you remember chiefly how much less terrible it was than you had feared, and how completely it ended the moment the sea went down. Your maid is ill, and says she is not, and works, and you let her keep the fiction, because taking it away from her would help nothing. The saloon fills up in the middle of the morning, and stays full, because there is nowhere else. Card tables are wedged into corners. A man reads aloud to 2 others. Somebody attempts the piano and gives it up, since a piano in a seaway is a comic instrument, and everybody laughs the first time, and nobody laughs the second. The swivel chairs, bolted through the deck on their cast iron pillars, come into their own at last, and you understand for the first time why the dining chairs of a great liner are screwed down like machinery. You have the children with you all day. This is the true weight of the afternoon. The nursery stewardess is stretched across 12 families and cannot be everywhere, and the deck is shut, and there is nothing for a boy of 9 to do with his body. So you read. You read for what feels like a very long time in the corner of the ladies' saloon, with your daughter's head against your arm, and your son on the floor, braced against the settee leg. And every so often, the ship leans over far enough that the boy slides 8 inches along the carpet, and thinks this the finest thing that has ever happened to him. At 4, the light outside goes from grey to a deeper grey. At 5:30, the stewards begin laying the fiddles for dinner again. And the day has been got through, hour by hour, by the deliberate and rather skillful application of ordinary things to a room that will not stay still. The weather eases in the night. You know it before you are properly awake, because the roll has gone long and lazy instead of short and spiteful, and the noise of things shifting in the cabin has stopped. By the middle of the following morning, the sea is a wide grey swell with no temper left in it. The deck doors are unlatched again, and the ship has recovered the habit of being a hotel rather than a machine in an argument, which returns you to the real problem of a crossing, the one nobody warns a first-time passenger about. Not the sea, the hours. 6 days is not a long time in a life. It is an extraordinarily long time in a room. And a woman of your class has been trained since girlhood to have her days shaped for her by errands, callers, tradesmen, church, the requirements of other people's schedules. And at sea, every one of those props is taken away at once. There are no shops, no callers, no letters arriving, no orders to give the cook, no accounts to settle with the butcher's boy, no reason to leave one room for another, except that you have grown tired of the first one. The ship gives you meals at fixed hours and expects you to invent everything in between. So the companies, being practical, built rooms whose only purpose was to absorb time. The library is aft on the promenade deck, panelled in a light satin wood, with a long table down the middle, covered in green baize, and a dozen chairs that do not swivel, which tells you at once that this room was not designed with heavy weather in mind. The books live behind glass, in cases with brass grills, and the cases are locked. A steward has the key and opens them at set hours, morning and afternoon, and writes your name in a ledger against the volume you take, and expects it back before you land. The collection is smaller than the room's dignity suggests. Perhaps 400 or 500 volumes on a ship of this size, bound sets of the standard novelists, because a set looks well and fills a shelf. Travel narratives, a shelf of sermons that nobody has disturbed since the ship was new. Some bound volumes of the illustrated magazines, a year or 2 out of date. A world atlas, a dictionary. And a run of light modern fiction in publisher's cloth, which is the only shelf with any real wear on it, because that is what people actually read at sea, and everybody knows it, including the company, which is why the shelf is restocked, and the sermons are not. The experienced passengers bring their own. You have seen the woman at the far end of your table, working steadily through a stack of yellow-back novels she bought at the railway bookstall at Lime Street before she came aboard. The cheap sort with the pictorial boards, 6pence or a shilling each, printed to be read once on a journey and left behind. She reads them in a day apiece and does not pretend otherwise. There is something restful in a woman who has stopped performing her reading, because reading, for you, has never been an entirely private act. Here is something worth slowing down for, since it shapes a great deal of what you do with these 6 days. A woman of your position in the 1880s is expected to be well read, and expected not to be seen working at it. You must be able to follow a dinner-table conversation about Ireland, or bimetallism, or the American tariff, or the new novels, well enough to say something apt and short, You must not say anything long. You must not correct a man on a matter of fact, unless you can do it as though you were agreeing with him. You must know enough poetry to recognize a quotation, and not so much that recognizing it looks like study. The whole apparatus of your education, such as it was, pointed at a single skill, which is the ability to be interesting for 4 minutes, and then hand the conversation back. And so, your cleverness has to arrive looking accidental. You read the reviews in the quarterlies, rather than the books sometimes, not from laziness, but because the review gives you the shape of the argument and the useful phrase, which is what the dinner table actually wants. Nobody at that table wants your considered opinion of 300 pages. They want you to be pleasant and current, and to make the man on your left feel that he has said something rather good. There are periodicals aboard, laid out on the library table each morning, though they date from the day of sailing, and will be a week stale by the time you land. That is one of the odd conditions of the passage that you have not entirely got used to. For 6 days, you know nothing. No news reaches this ship. Whatever is happening in Parliament, or on the exchanges, or in your own family, is happening without you, and will be waiting in a heap when you arrive. Some passengers find this unbearable and speak of it constantly. You have decided, privately, that it is the single best thing about the ocean. You spend the greater part of an hour at the writing desk in the corner of the saloon, which is where a surprising amount of the ship's real activity happens. The company provides paper, thick cream sheets with the line's name and house flag printed at the head, and envelopes to match, laid out in a rack, free to any first-class passenger who wants them, and everybody wants them. The headed paper is the point. A letter written on that paper announces from the first glance that the writer crossed in the saloon and not below, and the companies understood exactly what they were selling. People wrote more letters at sea than they ever did ashore. On paper they did not pay for, describing a voyage in which very little happened, purely for the pleasure of the letterhead. You write to your sister. You write to your mother-in-law, which takes longer and requires more care. You write a short one to the housekeeper at home about the linen and the coal order, because a household does not stop merely because you have gone to sea, and the letter will reach her days after you land, but the instructions will still hold. The letters go into the mail room and are landed with the rest of the ship's post. Coming east, they would be dropped at Queenstown on the Irish coast, where the mails go ashore by tender hours before the ship reaches Liverpool, so that a letter posted at sea can be in London before the writer is. Going west, they will go off at New York with the mail bags, and your sister will have your account of the storm in about a fortnight, by which time you will very likely have written her 3 more. At 3:30, a printed program appears in the hands of a steward. The concert is one of the fixed institutions of the Atlantic, and by the 5th day of a crossing, it has become inevitable. It is got up entirely by the passengers. Somebody with more confidence than sense volunteers to organize it. A list goes round, and by the afternoon of the performance, there is a program, actually printed by the ship's own press in a room somewhere below, on the same little machine that prints the daily bill of fare and the passenger list. The program is a document of pure social negotiation. 9 items. A gentleman from Manchester will sing something patriotic. A young woman traveling with her father will play the piano, and everybody knows she has been practicing in the music room since Tuesday. There is a recitation, which is always the item people dread, and always the item that goes best, because the man doing it is not nearly as good as he thinks, and the room enjoys knowing this together. 2 of the ship's own musicians play, which lends the whole thing a shape it would not otherwise have. And somebody's husband tells 3 anecdotes at a length that requires the chairman to stand up. You are asked to sing. You decline twice, and are asked a 3rd time, which is the number at which declining becomes rudeness. And so at 10 minutes past 8, you stand beside the piano in the saloon, with your hands folded, and sing 2 verses of something everyone knows, and sit down again to a great deal of warm applause from 90 people who have been at sea for 5 days and would applaud almost anything. Your daughter's face during this is worth the whole ocean. At the end, the chairman announces the collection. This is the reason the concert exists at all, or at least the reason it is permitted to exist, and every shipboard concert in these years ends the same way. A hat, or more usually, 2 of the stewards with plates going along the rows. The money goes to a seaman's charity ashore, an orphanage, a home for the widows of drowned men, a hospital in Liverpool or in New York. There is a subscription list on the library table afterward, with the names and the amounts, and everyone will read it, which is not entirely accidental. You give £1. £1 is a good subscription, and not an ostentatious one, and the calculation behind it takes you about 2 seconds, and has been trained into you over 20 years. Give too little, and you are noted. Give too much, and you are noted differently. And worse, because open-handedness on a passenger list can look like a woman announcing money she was not born with. £22 and some odd shillings is the total, read out by the chairman to applause, and it will be handed over at the pier by the purser, and the line will very likely see that a paragraph about it reaches a newspaper. Tea is at 4, and by the time you come down to it on the following afternoon, the world has settled into something almost domestic. Small tables, thin bread and butter, cake, tea properly made, because the company understands that this is a thing the English will judge them on absolutely, and a woman you have exchanged perhaps 11 words with since Liverpool sits down opposite you, entirely without ceremony, and says that she has been watching you manage those 2 children for 5 days and would like to know how on earth you do it. And you find, rather to your surprise, that you are talking, really talking, for the first time since the tender pulled away from the landing stage. The conversation lasts until nearly 5:30, and it is only when the saloon light changes, the stewards moving through to clear the small tables, that you realize how late it has become and how much needs doing before 7. Your maid has been in the cabin for an hour already. She has the dinner dress out of the trunk and laid across the berth, and she has been down to the pantry twice for irons, because the flat irons heat on a stove in a service room aft, and there are only so many of them, and a great many women aboard wanting them at the same hour. She has carried them back along the alleyway, wrapped in cloth, and she has tested each one against a scrap of muslin, and she is now working over the skirt on a board laid across the trunk lid, because there is no table in the room large enough. Silk taffeta will not forgive a hot iron. She knows this. She works with a damp cloth between the metal and the cloth, in short passes, along the grain, and the room smells of steam and warm fabric, and faintly of the coal that heated the stove. 6 days in a trunk does things to a dress that no amount of tissue paper prevents. The creases across the back of the skirt are the worst, because that is where the weight of the folded fabric has pressed against itself in a warm hold. She will get most of them out. She will not get all of them out, and both of you know it, and neither of you will mention it. This is worth slowing down for, because the evening dress of a woman in your position in the late 1880s is not one garment but a system, and it takes 2 people the better part of an hour to assemble. You begin again from the skin, because the wool serge day dress and everything that went under it has been worn since 8 in the morning in salt air. Fresh combinations. A fresh corset cover. The corset itself is not changed, but it is relaced tighter than it was for the deck, because the evening bodice is cut to a smaller measurement than the day bodice, and there is no adjusting it now. Then the petticoats, and there are 3. And the outer one is silk, because a silk petticoat makes a particular sound when a woman walks the length of a dining saloon, and that sound is part of the dress. The bodice and skirt are separate garments, hooked together at the waist along a line of hooks and bars, and the bodice fastens up the back with 22 of them, which is the reason a woman of your class does not dress herself. It is not delicacy. It is geometry. You physically cannot reach them. The sleeves stop at the elbow. The neck is cut low and square. This is an evening dress in the strict sense, meaning it announces that you are not going anywhere afterward except to bed, that your day is finished, that you are at leisure, and every woman who comes down to the saloon at 7 in a high-necked dress has announced something quite different about herself, whether she meant to or not. Then the hair, which takes 20 minutes and involves heated tongs, and then the gloves, which are white kid, 16 buttons, drawn on with a hook and reaching above the elbow to meet the sleeve, so that no part of your arm shows between them. And then the jewellery, which is a slightly complicated business at sea. Your good pieces have not been in the cabin since Liverpool. They have been in the purser's safe, in a locked box, with a numbered receipt in your dressing case, because every line of any standing offers this, and every experienced traveller uses it. The purser's office keeps hours for deposits and withdrawals, generally an hour in the morning and an hour before dinner, and there is a queue outside it at 6:30 every evening of a westbound crossing that is one of the reliable comic sights of ocean travel. A dozen women in various stages of being dressed, maids sent ahead to hold places, everyone perfectly polite, and everyone slightly anxious. You send the maid at 6:20 with the receipt. She comes back with the box, and inside it are the pearls, and the earrings, and the small diamond brooch that was your mother's. Here is the part of the safe system that nobody puts in the advertisements. The receipt is made out in your husband's name. The deposit was entered in his name in the purser's book at Liverpool. If you were to lose that slip of paper, the purser would not simply hand you your own mother's brooch on your own word, because his liability runs to the person named on the ticket, and the person named on the ticket is not you. It would be sorted out, certainly. It would be sorted out with your husband standing beside you at the office window, confirming that his wife may have her jewellery. You have never once thought this unusual. It is only when the maid puts the receipt back in the case, and you glance at the name written there in the purser's clerkly hand, that something in you notices it briefly, the way you might notice a stone in a shoe, and then walk on. The pearls go round your throat, the brooch goes at the centre of the bodice, the earrings, and then you are, by any measure the world uses, ready. The bugle for dinner goes at 10 minutes to 7. The saloon at 7 is a different room from the saloon at 8 in the morning. The lamps are all lit, the swinging brass ones and the fixed ones along the panelling, and the light comes off the polished mahogany and the glass in the overhead racks, and makes the whole long room look warmer than it is. The tablecloths have been changed. The flower arrangements, carried from Liverpool and kept in the cool, are on their last evening and beginning to show it. The band plays on the staircase, which is where the band always plays, because the well of the stairs carries the sound down into the saloon without any of the players taking up seats at the tables. 8 men, strings and a piano bolted to the deck. They will play through the whole of dinner, and they will play the sort of thing that can be talked over, which is a real skill and an underrated one. Dinner is 6 courses, and it is longer and slower than any meal you would sit down to at home on an ordinary evening. Soup first, 2 kinds offered, a clear one and a thick one. Then fish, which on the 6th day out is not fresh caught, but has come out of the ice room, and is very good regardless. Then an entree, something made, sweetbreads, or a vol au vent, the course where the chef demonstrates that he trained somewhere serious. Then the joint, carved at a side table by a steward with a napkin over his arm, roast beef or saddle of mutton, then game or poultry, and then the sweets, and then cheese, and then dessert proper, which means fruit and nuts, and the little dishes of preserved ginger, and the ice, if the ice room has held. Coffee afterward, and the ladies do not linger over it. The wine is not included in your passage, and this is the thing that catches out inexperienced travellers every single crossing. The fare covers the food. It covers as much food as any human being could reasonably eat, and rather more. It does not cover a drop of anything to drink beyond water and tea and coffee. Everything else is ordered from a printed list, signed for on a chit at the table, and settled with the purser on the final night. Claret at 4 or 5 shillings a bottle, champagne at 10 or 12, which is the price that does the damage, hock, sherry, a bottle of mineral water at 6pence, and every one of them written on a chit that you do not see again, until the whole column of them is added up and presented on the last evening out, by which time it has become a number that makes people go rather quiet. Your husband orders claret and a bottle of champagne on the 4th night, because there was a birthday at your table, and the chit for that one alone was 12 shillings. And you have been keeping a rough count in your head since Liverpool, because someone in the family has to, and it will not be him. At the next table is the American girl. She is perhaps 22, and she is travelling with her mother and a courier, and she is dressed by a Paris house in a way that is quietly expensively better than anything else in the saloon, and everyone has noticed, and no one has said so. Her father, it is generally understood, is in railways. There is something happening in the 1880s on these ships that is not happening anywhere else quite so visibly, and it is happening in the 2 feet of carpet between your table and hers. English rank is travelling west, and American money is travelling east, and the two of them meet in a dining saloon in the middle of the Atlantic and take each other's measure over the fish course. You know the arithmetic of it, because everyone does. A daughter of a Nevada silver fortune or a Chicago meat fortune can arrive in London with a settlement large enough to re-roof a house that has been standing since the 1500s, and a title that has been in a family for 4 centuries can be had, in effect, for the price of the repairs. Both sides call this a marriage. Neither side pretends, privately, that it is only that, and so the girl at the next table is perfectly civil to you, and her mother is more than civil, and you are aware, in a way that is entirely without malice on anybody's part, that you are being assessed for what you might be worth as an acquaintance in London, and that you are doing precisely the same to them, and that this, too, is a form of work conducted at a dinner table by 3 women who would all describe themselves as simply enjoying the voyage. At 8:30, the ladies rise, and the men stand, and the 2 halves of the passenger list go their separate ways for the evening, as they have every night since Liverpool. You go to the ladies' saloon, which is forward on the promenade deck, upholstered in something floral, with a piano and writing tables and a great many small chairs. Coffee is brought. The talk is of the landing and the customs, and whether the weather will hold, and whose maid has been ill, and it goes on gently for an hour and a half, and requires almost nothing of you, which after the day you have had is close to a mercy. The men go aft to the smoking room, which is panelled darker, ventilated better, and where the stewards bring whiskey and soda and cigars, and where the mileage pool is auctioned every evening at 9. The bidding on the last night out is the most serious of the passage. A single number in the pool has been known to go for £8 or £10, and the whole pool on a well-subscribed evening runs to 60 or 70, which is more than a good many of the men below decks earn in 2 years. You will hear the noise of it as you pass along the alleyway to your cabin at 10. A door opening, laughter, the smell of cigars, and then the door shutting again. But you do not go into the cabin, not yet. You take a wrap from the hook inside the door, and a shawl over that, and you go back up the companion to the boat deck, where the wind comes at you cold and clean, and takes the smell of the dining saloon out of your clothes in about 4 seconds. It is the last night. Tomorrow, if the run holds, there will be a pilot, and the day after that, there will be a pier. The deck is nearly empty. A steward passes with a folded rug over his arm and says good evening, and does not stop. Somewhere below, the band has finished. Above you, the funnels stand up black against a sky with more stars in it than you have seen in your life, because you have spent your life in Manchester and Liverpool and London under coal smoke. And out here there is nothing between you and the sky but cold air. You go to the rail aft, where the deck curves round, and you look down at the wake. It is lit That is the thing nobody tells you before your first crossing, and the thing you will try to describe afterwards to people who will nod politely and change the subject. The water the ship has just thrown aside glows, a pale greenish light, in ropes and knots and sudden bursts, running back from the counter in two long spreading arms and dying away perhaps 100 yards astern. It is not reflected light. There is no moon. The sea is making it. You have read what it is. Small living things in the water, disturbed by the passage of the hull, giving off light the way a firefly does. Knowing that does not spoil it. You stand at the rail with your hands going numb on the wet iron, and you watch the ship tear a lit road into the dark, and behind you a door opens and shuts, and the noise of the smoking room comes and goes, and you think, without any particular sadness, that in 2 days none of this will exist. There will be a pier, and porters, and a hotel, and letters to write. At 10:30 you go below, because your hands are cold, and because there is business still to do. The last night out is not restful. It is the settling of a small, temporary economy, and it all falls to you, because your husband has gone to the smoking room, and will regard the whole of it as arranged. The purser's office is open until 11 on the final evening, and there is a queue. You wait behind a clergyman and a woman with a folder of papers, and when your turn comes, the purser has your account ready in a ledger, written out in a clear commercial hand. It is not the passage money. That was paid in Liverpool. This is everything the passage money did not include, and the list of what it does not include is longer than most people expect. Wine and spirits and mineral waters, which are charged by the bottle and are not cheap. Claret at 6 shillings, champagne at 12 and upward, soda water at 6p a bottle, and a great many bottles of it. Deck chair, hire for the voyage, 4 shillings with the name card. Bath money, if you have taken more than the allowance. The chair for the maid, if she has been given one. Telegrams, if any have been sent from the ship by the signal stations. A subscription to the concert collection. The mileage pool tickets your husband bought on 3 separate evenings, and has not mentioned since. It comes to a little over £5. You look at it properly, line by line, because you have looked at every household book you have ever been handed, and you are not going to stop at sea. And you find 1 bottle of hock charged that you are reasonably certain belongs to the next table. You say so, mildly. The purser looks and strikes it out and apologizes, and it takes 11 seconds and saves 4 shillings, and the small dry satisfaction of it stays with you all the way back along the alleyway. Then the envelopes. Every steamship company in the world printed notices saying that gratuities were not required. Every passenger in the world knew that this was a polite fiction, and that the amount you gave, and to whom, and in what form, was watched and remembered and discussed by other passengers, with an interest bordering on the forensic. Give too little, and you are mean. Give too much, and you are new money, trying too hard, and both verdicts will follow you off the ship. So there is a scale, and everybody knows it, and nobody writes it down. Your table steward, who has carried your plates 4 times a day for 6 days, and learned within 1 meal that you take no fish at breakfast, receives 10 shillings. The bedroom steward, who has made the berths, and brought the morning tea, and fetched the hot water can, receives the same. the stewardess, who has looked after you and the children, and has been up half of 2 nights with a small girl who could not settle, receives 10 shillings, and, from you personally, rather more than the scale requires, because you know exactly what her nights have been. The bath steward, 5 shillings. The boots, half a crown. The deck steward, who moved your chair round the ship 4 times a day, chasing the lee side, 5 shillings. The nursery attendant, 5. Roughly £2.10 altogether, which is a real sum. A housemaid ashore earns £16 a year, all found. You are handing out, in 6 days of tipping, about 1/10 of what a woman in your own kitchen earns in 12 months. And you are doing it in envelopes so that no one sees the amount, and you are writing each name on the front in pencil so that the right envelope reaches the right hand. And this is your money in the sense that you administer it, and not your money in any other sense. Your husband gave you notes in Liverpool. He will not ask what became of them. He would be surprised to be told how much of the last night of a crossing consists of arithmetic done by his wife at a small folding table in a stateroom at 11 at night. Beside the envelopes lies the printed passenger list, which the company issues on the second day out, a little booklet with the ship's name and the sailing date, and every first cabin name in alphabetical order. You have gone through it more than once. You go through it again now, and you mark, lightly, in pencil, the 4 names you will want to remember. 2 you will write to, 1 you will call upon in New York, 1 you will avoid if she calls upon you. This is the real product of the crossing, and you are the one who manufactured it, over 6 days of deck chairs and table talk and coffee in a floral saloon. You sleep badly, as everyone does on the last night, and not because of the sea, which has gone quiet, because the engines have changed note, and because you are listening for something. At about 4 in the morning, the ship slows. You feel it before you hear anything, the long shudder easing, the pulse under the floor slackening off. Then voices on deck, and the rattle of a ladder going over the side. And then, quite distinctly, a stranger's voice speaking American English somewhere above your head. The pilot has come aboard, out of a small schooner that has been standing off the shipping lane in the dark, waiting for exactly this. He climbs a rope ladder up the side of a moving ship in the middle of the night, in an overcoat, carrying nothing, and goes straight to the bridge. And from that moment, the captain, who has run the ship across 3,000 miles of ocean, stands aside on his own vessel and lets a man he has never met take her in. You are on deck by 6:30, with a coat over your night clothes and a shawl over that, which you would not do in any other circumstance in your life. And neither would the 11 other women standing along the rail in more or less the same condition. You can smell it before you can see it. Land, earth and pine and smoke, faint but unmistakable after 6 days in which everything you have breathed has been salt and coal. The color of the water has changed. There are gulls and a fishing boat, and then a low green line to the westward that resolves into trees, and a lighthouse, and a long pale spit of sand. Sandy Hook, someone says, and everyone repeats it to everyone else, as though they had not all heard. Off the quarantine ground, the ship stops altogether, and the health officer comes aboard from a launch and goes below with the ship's surgeon. And the first cabin passengers are asked to be visible, and are looked at, briefly and courteously, in a way that takes 4 minutes and is over before you have decided whether to be offended. Below decks, in steerage, the same inspection will take a great deal longer and be a great deal less courteous, and will not be over for hours. Then the customs declaration, printed, to be filled in and signed. Everything purchased abroad. Everything in the trunks that is new. You fill it in for the whole family, because of course you do. Because you are the only person aboard who knows what is in those trunks. And you declare the 2 dress lengths and the books, and the small clock. And you do not declare the lace, because nobody declares the lace. And this is understood by everyone, including one suspects, the customs officers. By 8, the trunks are coming up out of the hold and being stacked on the afterdeck in lettered piles, alphabetically by surname, so that the whole ship's baggage stands sorted in the open air under a grey New York sky. And yours is somewhere in the letter you were born into and then married into. You go down one last time to the stateroom. It is stripped. The berths are bare, the wardrobe empty, the little rack over the washstand holding nothing. 6 days of your life happened in this room, and it has already forgotten you. You climb back up into the noise. That is the first thing about arriving, and nobody who has not made the crossing quite believes it beforehand. For 6 days you have lived inside 2 sounds, and only 2. The engines, which are constant and low, and eventually stop being a sound at all, and become a condition of the body, and the sea, which is variable and closer than it has any right to be. Everything else has been small. A bell, a steward's tread in the alleyway, a child's shoe on a companionway stair, the ship's band working through its 4 reliable pieces. Your ear has spent nearly a week in a room with the door shut. And then the tugs come alongside off the battery, and the ship swings up the North River against the tide, and the city arrives all at once through the open rail like something poured over you. Steam whistles, several at a time, from ferries you cannot see. Carts on cobbles. The clatter of a passing elevated train somewhere inland, which you feel before you identify. Men shouting at other men across water in a dozen accents. A dog. Church bells, oddly, at 8:45 in the morning. It is not louder than Liverpool. It is simply that you have been away from the whole category of sound, and it comes back not as noise, but as weather. And for a moment, on the deck of a stopped ship, you stand with a glove in one hand and cannot think. The pier is enormous and wooden and smells of tar and fish and horses. Below you, the gangways are being run out, and the baggage is going down in lettered piles, and the customs men in their coats are waiting at trestle tables under the shed roof. Your maid is at your elbow with the small case and the umbrellas. Your children are holding the rail with both hands, both of them, the way you told them to an hour ago, and did not expect to be obeyed. Let us stop here, before the gangway, and say plainly what has happened over the past 6 days, because the record will not say it. You moved a household of 5 across an ocean. Say it in the flattest possible terms, and it still sounds like a good deal of work. And it was. You decided in August what would be needed in New York in October, and packed accordingly, which required knowing the American climate, the American calendar of engagements, and the American habits of dress, well enough to guess at all 3 from 3,000 miles away. You divided that packing into what could be reached at sea and what could not. And you were right, and being right is invisible. Had you been wrong, everyone would have known it by Tuesday. You engage the cabins. You check the fares against the fares of 2 other lines. You arranged the maid's passage in the second cabin and settled beforehand what she would be paid extra for a voyage and what would count as her own time. Aboard, you managed the table. You accepted a placing that was not the one you asked for and made it look like the one you wanted, which is a specific skill and a difficult one, and one that has no name. You made the acquaintance of 4 families and the near acquaintance of 6 more, and you knew exactly which of those would survive the landing and which would not, and you spent your effort accordingly. You had the children fed at hours that suited the ship rather than at the hours that suited the children, and you absorbed the difference yourself in the afternoons, in a cabin, reading aloud through a gale with a basin at hand and a steady voice. You kept the money, the deck chairs, the sweepstake tickets, the wine account, the library subscription, the collection for the Seamen's Orphanage, the envelopes for the bedroom steward and the table steward and the bath steward and the stewardess, each with the right sum in it, and each handed over at the right moment with the right word. You knew what was expected because you asked discreetly of a woman who had crossed before, and you knew that asking was itself a small risk, and you took it early enough that the risk was cheap. You did all of that with a body laced into a corset in a rolling ship, on broken sleep, in a room 10 feet by 7, with a headache for 2 of the 6 days, and you did it while appearing to be a woman on holiday. That last part is the work. Everything else is merely the work being done. The appearance of ease is the product, and the product is expensive, and you have been manufacturing it since the tender pulled away from the Liverpool landing stage. Now the other thing, said just as plainly. The ticket was bought in your husband's name. Both tickets, and the maid's, and the excess baggage, all of it entered in the company's ledger against him. The passenger list printed aboard and read by everyone in the saloon gives him his full name and his occupation, and gives you as his wife, and gives your children as his children, and gives your maid, if it gives her at all, as a servant travelling with the party. The customs declaration you filled in your own hand, item by item, because you were the only living person who knew what was in those trunks. That document goes ashore with his signature required on it. The wine account you totaled and checked and queried and settled with the purser stands in the company's books against his name. The letters of credit waiting at the bank on Wall Street are drawn on his account, and you will draw on them, and every clerk who sees the paper will see him. If you were to search, 50 years from now, or 140, for a record of this voyage, you would find the ship, and the date, and the weather, and the cargo manifest, and the daily runs, and the coal consumed, and a man's name with the word wife set beside it like a piece of luggage. Nowhere would you find the 6 weeks of planning. Nowhere the table placement, the tips, the illness borne quietly, the 400 small decisions. There is no column in any ledger for it. There never was. That is not an accident, and it is not a cruelty by any particular person. It is simply how the accounting was built, and the accounting was built by people who did not think of what you do as work, because it did not produce a wage and could not be separated out and priced. And here is what must be held alongside that, because it is equally true, and it is the part that gets flattened out of these stories. You liked it. Not all of it. Not the gale, not the fourth afternoon, not the hour when the youngest cried, and there was nowhere on the whole ship to take a crying child where somebody would not hear. But the deck at 10:30 in the morning, with the coffee going cold on the arm of the chair, and the horizon empty in every direction. You liked that. The mileage chalked up at noon, and the small ripple of interest through the saloon. You liked that too, and you took a ticket in the pool on the third day, and lost, and were pleased to have taken it. The concert, the woman from Baltimore who talked to you about her sister for 40 minutes and made you laugh twice. The phosphorescence in the wake at 11 at night, which you will describe badly to people for the rest of your life, and which nobody who has not seen it will understand. You are good at this, and being good at a difficult thing is its own pleasure, entirely regardless of who notices. That pleasure is real. It does not cancel the erasure, and the erasure does not cancel it. Both stand. The gangway is down. There is the shuffle and press of first cabin passengers finding their gloves, and the shed below with its trestle tables, and somewhere on the pier, a man from the hotel holding a card with a name on it. His name, of course. You take your daughter's hand. Your maid has the small case. You go down the gangway, into the American noise with your chin at the angle you have held it for 6 days, and by evening you will be in a room on Fifth Avenue with the trunks arriving and a new set of arrangements to make, and the whole apparatus starting up again on land. But leave that. Leave the pier and the noise, and go back up, one deck at a time, into the emptied ship. The alleyway is quiet. The stewards have not yet come through with the pails and the scrubbing and the turning out of berths for the passengers who will board tomorrow evening for the eastward run. Your stateroom door stands open, wedged back against the bulkhead. The berths are bare boards. The wardrobe is a wooden box with nothing in it. On the washstand, the fiddle rails stand up around an empty marble top, holding nothing at all against a motion that has stopped. The porthole is open on its brass catch. Grey light comes in from the river, and with it the smell of tar and coal and low water, and very faintly, from somewhere far below, the sound of a hose running on a deck. And then not even that,